All right, welcome back, everybody. We are live for another live streaming alternative Money Monday here on the Ledgerama YouTube channel. Welcome back. Happy New Year. Great to see everybody. Thanks for showing up. And we are really pleased to have a special guest this week to kick off our new year. Ken Anderson of LaunchBadge, none other than the OG of OGs in the Hedera ecosystem. All right, so my name is Jeremy Fletcher, of course, co-founder of Ledgerama, makers of Walla Wallet, the original, the safest, and the trusted mobile wallet in the Hbar ecosystem. Of course, today I'm joined by our lead developer of Walla Wallet, my partner and CTO, Rob Keynes. Happy to see Brandon the Hbar Bull back for a new episode. Of course, our community manager, Tim Mongai, and as I introduced, Ken Anderson of LaunchBadge, here to talk about a new service that's out in the Hedera ecosystem, the Kabuto name service. So, of course, we'll do our usual token giveaway at the end. We're going to give away 10,000 jam tokens to one of our Twitter family followers. And of course, if you like the content that you see here on the Ledgerama channel on this Alternative Money Monday episode, please give us a like, give us a subscribe, leave a comment. The comments are really important. All right, so without any further ado, I'll go ahead and just dive right into it. So I'd be a little remiss if we didn't get a little background on Ken Anderson, the OG of OGs in the Hedera ecosystem. So Ken, if you would, just, I know that it's such a vast background within the Web3 space in Hedera that, we could spend a couple hours talking about all the stuff that you've done in the ecosystem. So we won't do that, but I do want to give the audience a, just kind of a brief overview of what your relationship with Hashgraph is, maybe a little bit about how you found it in the first place and how you got started, and just a little bit about some of the stuff that LaunchBadge has done with and for the Hedera ecosystem, because you guys have been integral really since day one.
Sure thing. Yeah. So I started LaunchBadge with my business partner, Ryan, back in 2014. And we had a number of projects we were working on, and one in particular got some traction in the Web3 space. And we were looking for layer one solutions that would actually meet our requirements. And so that's when I ran into Hashgraph at the time, back when it was Swirlds SDK, before there was a Hedera. That was back in the September of 2017. And I really wanted to get a license to it. And I didn't know how to get a hold of anybody. And I saw that Mance was speaking at a conference. So I saw that Mance was speaking at a conference overseas. And so I bought a plane ticket, went to the conference, offered to buy him a mango smoothie, sat down, and he finally said, yeah, I'll give you a license. And I asked him all the questions the community was asking, right? All of the open source questions, all of the public ledger questions, all of those things I was asking him. And we started to develop a dialogue over the next few months. And in late 2017, he messaged me back and said, hey, how about you just come work with us and help us build the dev community? So I kind of I handed basically LaunchBadge over to my business partner, Ryan, and then I kind of put myself on hold over at LaunchBadge and lent myself over to Hedera to help kind of start the whole developer ecosystem. And so that was kind of how LaunchBadge and Hedera kind of came into being together. That was back in, I believe, March of 2018 when Hedera launched. And so I spent the next three and a half years with Hedera building that developer ecosystem, and it's grown massively since. We brought on some incredible talent, especially in the executive side, to the point where it was no longer really a startup to me. I had done as much as I could on the inside, so I thought, okay, I'm going to go back out to LaunchBadge, and we're going to go do as much as we can on the outside to help build the Hedera ecosystem and technology in the Web3 space in general. So that was kind of the history of LaunchBadge, and LaunchBadge has been involved all throughout building SDKs, building proofs of concepts. We've built my Hbar wallet, which was acquired by Immutable Holdings. So we've been around the block quite a bit. I would actually argue that other than the internal Hedera team, really nobody knows Hedera and Hashgraph better than LaunchBadge. So that's where we stand right now.
I remember back in Hedera 18, there in Dallas, Texas, for the first developer conference and hackathon for Hedera 18. You were integral with the very first Hedera SDK. I mean, I remember sitting there at the table with some other developers. Of course, we were kind of talking about different use cases and what we were going to build. And I remember at some point it was late in the evening, but you came out and you were like, so guys, tell me a little bit about the SDK, what kind of, what was good about it? What did you not like about it? I mean, and this was, that was Hedera 18. So, you had your finger, you had your fingers on the steering wheel there for quite a while. So
that was a fun hackathon with really good food, by the way. I remember the nacho bar they had there.
Food
That
was great there. Yes.
No doubt. All right. So that's kind of the short version. So that is, and again, there are so many things that we could go over, so many things that LaunchBadge has done, but we want to get to the kind of the heart of the matter here. So the topic for today that we're going to be talking about is the Kabuto name service. And this is a Web3 domain service that is now integrated in Walla Wallet. So thanks to the dev team, basically Ken reached out to us and said, hey, would Walla Wallet be interested in supporting Kabuto name service, KNS? And we said, of course, absolutely. It's one of those things that our teams have been working in the Hedera space so long that it's almost like we kind of take each other. I think we kind of took each other for granted. Like, yeah, I know those guys are busy working. Yeah, I know those guys are busy working. But it was like, hey, we've never worked together. So it was a prime time for a collaborative effort between the two teams, and super excited to get into that, especially coming into 2023 here, new year, new partnerships, new collaborations. So super excited about it. So if you could tell us just a little bit about, and by the way, Rob, you're welcome. Any of the, all the panelists are always welcome to jump in with any questions. I talk a lot, so I'll just kind of ramble on. But if at any point, you've got a question or you want to interject or come in with something, please just, feel free to just hop right on in there. But just to kind of get a little bit of context for Kabuto name service, could you tell us just a little bit about domain name service, what DNS is and why it's important for the internet, and then a little bit about why this is important for Web3 going forward? And
can it be decentralized, and is that even a good idea? Right.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of questions to unpack there, but we'll start with the what is DNS. So DNS is basically how we've removed IP addresses from the conversation of how we interact on the web. So, I'm not going to get into IP addresses and MAC addresses and all the different addresses that happen in the internet that make it all work. But everybody's used to typing in google.com or hedera.com. And those names, that hedera.com is actually a pattern that can be unwound by computers and routed to the appropriate servers that will give you the content you want. So if you're looking for a picture and you go to hedera.com / whatever the picture name is, your computer is actually interpreting all of that into an address, an IP address, and then eventually down into a MAC address at the local router level at the servers that tells the internet where to find that picture, on what computer does that picture reside. So you can think of it kind of like addressing. We all have addresses to our home. And when you put in that address, the letters get to where they need to get to, the boxes, the packages get to where they need to get to, which is your front doorstep. Same thing with the internet. Everything is just computers talking to computers, and we have to figure out how to address computers so they can talk to each other. And so DNS is how domain name service is how addressing works on the internet. And so, mail.google.com is a different address than calendar.google.com. And they point to different sets of servers that give you the service that you're looking for, render the web page that you're looking for on the internet. And so that's DNS, the idea that you can have addresses that are simple to remember that get you the content you want.
And is that centrally managed? How is DNS managed generally, such that if I tried to create a google.com myself and direct traffic to my own google.com as opposed to the real google.com, how is that managed? Is it centrally managed? How is the DNS database managed?
Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of what are called name servers, and that's kind of what we're replacing a little bit with what we're doing with KNS. But there are a bunch of name servers out there, and each of these name servers, they all register to a central location that helps deduplicate the canonical name server, the authoritative name server for a specific address. So when you go to google.com, I suspect Google is managing their own name servers. So they've got their own name servers on google.com. When you go to hedera.com, Hedera might be using a third-party name service that is a name server. And the point being is those servers hold the records that tell computers how to resolve addresses. whoever is managing those computers can manage those records. And I think that's an important distinction to make where you're talking about centralized. I would say that DNS is distributed, meaning that it is hosted on lots of servers that act as name servers, but each one of those name servers is managed by an authority that can change those records.
Okay.
And so I think that's the important distinction. I wouldn't necessarily call it decentralized in the sense that we talk in Web3 of there being like, my keys, my crypto type of decentralization.
Right.
But it's distributed in the sense that there are lots of computers participating in managing DNS, but the authority to manage those records is still very centralized.
Right. Okay. And so now, so let's get into KNS. So Kabuto name service. So what was it that kicked off that kicked KNS off? Like, what was it that, that you and the LaunchBadge team said, you know what, we really need to work on this? And then of course, I'll ask you about what it is and how it works a little bit. We don't need to go too far in the technical weeds, but what was the thing that, what was the kind of light bulb that kicked on? You said, you know what, we need to do this.
Yeah, I mean, there were a number of things. I mean, the first one was, addressing in the Web3 space is still one of the biggest friction points for end users. Being able to remember I still don't remember what my Hedera address is, and Lehman made it so incredibly simple for me. It's 3 sets of numbers separated by periods, and I have to look it up every time I want to give my address out. And you guys have been doing this for a while, but the checksum on the addresses. That was an incredible security feature added to addresses. So there's lots of things that we've done to make addresses more secure, but they're not very convenient. Right. And there are other projects that have tried to solve this. You have the Ethereum name service, ENS, which basically said, ken.eth points to some set of Ethereum addresses, and you could send money to ken.eth, and that money would get to whoever the owner of that address is. And we thought, well, first of all, maybe this will kind of lean a little bit into how we're doing what we're doing. But we looked at it and we said, well, why didn't ENS do like a full DNS model? Like if you look at DNS, it's very flexible. You can add, it's all driven by what are called records. A record has a host name, and then it has the value of the record. And that value is your address, and the host name is what you want the addressable part to be. So ken.h, for example, or ken.hh, which is a domain that we've launched, ken.hh, by default, the root host on that points to one of my Hedera account IDs. But I can also create a subdomain and say have streaming.ken.hh, which now allows me to say, hey, whenever I'm streaming, any of my viewers could now send money to that streaming.ken.hh, and that points to a different Hedera account ID. And so this is how DNS works. It's very flexible with the addressing model. You can create subdomains kind of organically. Lots of cool things you can do with DNS. And I noticed that ENS wasn't doing that. I mean, we looked at ENS and we're like, wow, ENS is very limited in the sense of how they're doing things, and they do it in a very specific structure. And it kind of makes sense when you think about the limitations of, just the cost limitation and the time limitations to execute on Ethereum. Costs alone are prohibitive to have these massive record sets that could be addressable. And we thought, you know what, maybe we can do DNS on Hedera where ENS wasn't able to do it because of those limitations. And so we started to play around with it. And I think it was in September we started to build it. And in mid-October, we were just like, can we even do this? And by the middle of October, we had said, you know what, this is actually doable. We could actually see, with a few optimizations that we still have yet to do, about 4.6 billion records that we could support on KNS. And we thought, oh, wow, that's actually doable. And, Hedera is going to get more optimized. Sharding is going to become a thing at some point. There are going to be file system optimizations that make it faster and easier and able to support more records. And so there are things that are going to happen as KNS grows that Hedera is going to improve on that makes KNS even more scalable.
Right.
So So
Rob,
anyway, that was the problem we were looking at.
Right. And so I just wanted to ask, so Rob had some, Rob, I believe you have you have a simulator available, and we just kind of wanted to show folks out in the audience a quick demo. I'm always a little dubious about doing demos on a live stream, but I trust Rob. Rob's good at these. He has a lot more success than I do at these live demos. So so an address book is something that we added to our most recent version of Walla Wallet that's out now. So there's some huge improvements. So after version 2.0 of Walla Wallet came along, Rob and the development team were hard at work adding some kind of quality of life improvements. And one of the ones that our users have been screaming for a long time was an address book. You mentioned, Ken, how hard it is to remember,
Right.
what your account ID is, or especially if if that's your own. Imagine if you're trying to remember one of the exchanges or one of your friends or something like that. So we added the address book, and it goes right along. It's a very nice, it complements our support for Kabuto name service. And so I just kind of wanted to show this off briefly. And as you can see there in the send to, go ahead, Rob. I'll let you talk.
So I just typed in ken.hh, and that resolves to the address 848,638. And I was going to send him an Hbar, but then I figured, we need to hold on to our money because things are a little difficult right now. Go ahead and click on LedgerRama Hbar, and I can send ourselves an Hbar instead.
Sorry, Ken.
No, I didn't send it. But anyway, here's the address book. You can add additional entries. You can edit this entry. You can see here the LedgerRama.Hbar resolves to this account ID. That account ID will resolve at the time that you select it from the address book. So it doesn't store the account ID here in this case. You can store an account ID here if you want, but you can also store the name. And if it's a name, whenever I click on it to select it, it'll resolve here again. You can see it resolving there, so that it resolves at the time that you make the payment, in case the name address for some reason changed. But,
Rob, while you go ahead, Tim.
Okay, so if you're feeling particularly lazy, could you use the QR code to?
Oh yeah. I can't now because I'm using the simulator on my computer. But if I had it on a device, I could use the QR code. I could point it to ken.hh, QR code generated with that. We only support the string as it is right now, right? So if you pointed to an address that was generated with a QR code, or a name that was generated, just a free text, then it'll work. So we don't have, I don't even know that there is a standard yet for doing addresses, as and memo fields and encoding that kind of thing. But in the address book, you can also save the memo field if you want to, because I know certain exchanges will have, they'll have accounts that you need to route them to using the memo field. And, here, if I were to select this, it'll give me a message here too. If I select it, if you're sending to an exchange account, please be sure the memo text is still accurate. And if I go ahead and change this, say I change it real time here, and then I go ahead and try to send it, it will actually tell me, hey, your memo has changed. Do you want to save the new memo in your address book for this address? So I can say yes or no. And then if I say yes, it'll update the one in the address book.
I gotta say, Rob, when I saw the little exclamation point, the little warning there about sending to an exchange, I thought, another warning. And then what was funny was, I thought, another one of these warnings. But then when I actually went to use our exchange, and guess what? They changed the memo. So I was like, hey, all right, Rob, good job. So, it was one of those that I had saved the memo that I usually use for our exchange, but in this instance, it had changed. So that was a nice little reminder. So thanks for looking out for us, Rob. Rob's always got the users in mind. If anything, we do not want people to lose their precious Hbar, and Rob goes to painstaking
that's exactly
lengths
right.
to make sure that doesn't happen. Go ahead, Brandon.
So, Rob, I don't know if you want to bring the demo back up, but I had a question for Ken, and I think I know the answer to this because I saw a message go out about it, but I actually already bought a domain on Kabuto, and it's the Hbar symbol. Now, of course, we don't have the Hbar symbol on our computers or on our phones, so how does that resolve if you're using a twidgetal.hbar domain?
You mean Twitter that? Okay.
It's the Hbar symbol. So that's the one that I actually bought, was the twidgetal and then .hbar symbol.
Yeah. So one of the really cool things about Kabuto is that out of the box, we supported Unicode characters. And we did that on purpose. I mean, if it's okay, Jeremy, if I take a step back and kind of talk about the KNS bigger strategy.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Well, Rob goes and figures out how to type the Hbar
I don't know
on
how
the
to
simulator.
Yeah, this is the crux of my question.
Yeah. So let me answer Brandon's question first, and then I'll kind of step back a little bit into like the strategy of it. But we support Unicode, both Unicode top level domains, which is what comes after the dot, and Unicode domain names, which is what comes before the dot, the final dot, I should say. And so the top level domain, we launched kind of a little bit as a gimmick, the Hbar symbol. So the Planck's constant, that lowercase Hbar. Mm-hmm. It was a little bit of a gimmick. And the reason for that is we wanted to demonstrate that we could do Unicode TLDs as well. And Unicode top level domains would also cover things like, Chinese characters, Korean characters, non-ASCII characters, the non-Latin characters. So we could have top level domains that are, specific to other languages other than English. Now, to Brandon's point, that's not very useful for a primarily English speaking audience to have Planck's constant, which also is, kind of difficult to type no matter what keyboard you're using, what language keyboard you're using. And so what we did is, for the time being, since there is no .h TLD, we just basically said, okay, .h resolves to the Hbar or the Planck's constant symbol. So,
but it's not working.
Oh, he probably doesn't have an address set.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
I'll have to go and set the address. See,
this is actually this. I'm glad you're bringing this up and demonstrating this. We had some really good Twitter users. I'll make a shout out to Cobb. Cobb has been very active with buying domains, but we had this discussion in DMs on Twitter of when you buy a domain on KNS, we don't assume that you want that domain to point to the purchaser's address. Okay. That's not how DNS works. With DNS, when you buy a domain on DNS, there are no assumptions about where that address is pointed to. So the first thing you have to do when you buy an address is to add an address record and point that to wherever you want. Because there are scenarios where you might want to buy an address and immediately point it to a different account ID because you're doing it for business reasons or for co-op reasons or community reasons. You don't want it to automatically go to the payer's address. Now, that may change in the future. I think we're going to take some community feedback on that because I think in general, that is a question that comes up a lot of like, hey, I just bought this domain. Why isn't it resolving? It's like, well, have you set your address yet? So we may just, by default set that address going forward, but I think we're going to take some community feedback on that.
Yeah, I bought it with the address that I wanted to tie it to, but I wasn't sure exactly how that was going to work. So maybe in the future you could do a quick tutorial on how to tie it to it after the fact.
Yeah, absolutely. I know on Twitter we have a bunch of good videos on the KNS account. So if you want to go look at some of those short videos, we've got one in particular that goes over. We've got a few that go over adding addresses and subdomains and all kinds of stuff.
Awesome.
But we're going to keep those recycling because that's something obviously that people aren't used to, because whether it's ENS or Web23 or Hashgraph.name, they all by default resolve to the purchasing address.
Right. Right.
So
when somebody goes to purchase a domain, what are they actually getting? Like, what is this something that they can represent in their own wallet and see and trade and move around? What is it that they're actually purchasing?
Well, so there's a few things they're purchasing. So the first thing you buy is you get is an NFT, and that NFT is more like a credential to manage a bunch of records that are stored in a smart contract. So the first thing you get is an NFT. That NFT gives you the right to add and remove records from that domain. And so you can actually see that NFT in your wallet. Now, depending on which wallet you use, I happen to know with Walla Wallet, you can actually see some details, which is nice. It actually looks like an NFT in Walla Wallet. In some other wallets, it's a little bit more cryptic because it just looks like a blank NFT because we're working with some of the metadata stuff around it, because most NFT rendering galleries depend on IPFS to store the metadata, which is immutable, and immutable doesn't work with domains. So domains need to be mutable. They need to be changeable. And, just, it seems like the protocols for NFTs have leaned more immutable, so not changeable. So, so you get that NFT.
By the way, yeah. Awesome.
So Yeah, there was also one more thing to mention too. We are supporting the protocol as used for metadata for NFTs as well. So if you wanted to,
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so if you wanted to point to, another file somewhere using a KNS name, you could do that, KNS : and then the path to it, and then the name, I guess, that you want to resolve. And you can set that in your, your metadata field for your token on the ledger for Hedera, and then retrieve the metadata from using that name. And you can also use that in the files array as well, if you're referring to a file and you wanted to refer to it via a domain name. Yeah.
I'm actually really glad you brought that up, Rob, because I think that kind of pulls us back a little bit. A lot of the questions is like, what's the value of a name service, right? Like, why do I want to buy a domain name? The kind of the low hanging fruit or the brute force answer is, I want to be able to receive crypto without having to give out a static account ID that might change in the future. I might want you to send to a different account ID in the future, but you can always send a ken.hh, right? And that'll always get to my account because I'm the only one who controls my account. So I can change that account ID if I ever need to. So there's kind of this convenient simplicity part. That's the brute force model. Something to point out is that we don't just support Hedera account IDs. We support the entire SLIP44 spectrum, which is all the major blockchains out there, all the standardized major blockchains out there. We support addressing for all of them. Now, we've only exposed in our dApp, I think 4 or 5 of them in the KNS dApp. But anybody who integrates with KNS, the protocol supports every blockchain. And so I think taking a step back, the vision of KNS is not that we become Hedera's name service resolution, that we become the Web3 name service, meaning that there's this vision I have in the future someday where maybe even MetaMask uses KNS to resolve Solana, Binance, Ethereum addresses, where people multi-chain wallets would use KNS because it's still decentralized and it's cheap and it's fast relative to every other name service solution out there.
I just wanted to clear up. I mentioned for the file URLs, that's not exactly true. That's something we wanted to do, and that's going to be for the future. But for the metadata part of it, we do support the metadata API that you have for that and for the HIP 405 spec. We are, to my knowledge, the only wallet that supports HIP 405 as it's currently written. So,
yeah. Well, go ahead.
No, please continue.
I was just going to say, we talk about multi-chain addressing being supported by KNS. But beyond that, I think there's a whole world that's going to open up here when we think about dynamic data. So not only does KNS support address records, which is how we send crypto to each other, but it also supports text records. And these text records are arbitrary. They can be whatever you want. And kind of what Rob is talking about with regard to metadata, we can actually link those text records to the metadata for NFTs. So you can actually kind of define your own NFTs and create almost like these dynamic NFTs where the metadata for that NFT is referenced as a KNS record, text record, that is mutable by the owner of the KNS NFT. So that being said, what we're doing is we're opening up dynamic NFTs without changing how NFTs work fundamentally. We're adding a decentralized address resolution mechanism that includes text records, and you can have anything in your text record. I have some text records that are just like different photos I want to have associated. I think I have Hollow Knight as one of the images called avatar.ken.hh, I think is Hollow Knight. And so you can have different text records for different purposes. You can have, I've got Korean subdomain as a text record that is idom, which means name in Korean. And then I put my Korean name as the value for that. So you can have different text records associated with it as well. So it's not just like an addressing solution. It's also part of an identity solution where we can start to represent ourselves with various properties, and we can use multiple KNS records for different contexts. And so it's a much bigger picture. I don't want to get too much into it. I'm sure we can talk for hours about all this stuff.
Right.
But I just wanted to paint the picture. Like the vision for KNS is so much bigger than just crypto sending. That's the first step, and that's very useful. But as Rob's pointed out, we're already kind of using this to help with NFTs and metadata, which is kind of outside the scope of crypto sending. And there's so many other use cases I think it's going to bleed over into, and there's some that we haven't even identified yet.
Yeah, and Tim kind of keenly caught on to the, basically the decentralized identity nature potential of the KNS records. So in the thumbnail that he created, so that was kind of cool to see. So you were talking, we touched briefly on KNS and how it can solve problems generally in the Web3 space. I did want to ask a little bit about, typically I wouldn't ask about other projects, but how is KNS similar or different than Web23 and Hashgraph.name? So we've seen in the past few months, we've seen a few other of the Hbar, Hedera centric domain name services come out. In what ways, and how does KNS support those? In what ways is it similar, and in what ways is it different?
Yeah, so we've got a really friendly relationship with both of those projects, and there's at least one other project that's coming out here pretty soon. But Web23 and Hashgraph.name are kind of the big incumbents. Right. We've got a great relationship with them. We're in ongoing discussions with how we keep things integrated. As of right now, KNS is also resolving all of the Web23 and Hashgraph.name domains as well. We're talking about how to have a more common standard between all of us.
Right.
It's a little bit unfair because, Web23 has been building for about a year now. Hashgraph.name has been doing about the same. And when they both started their project, some of the functionality that we have in KNS wasn't even available to them. It wasn't actually until October 15th that there was a release of Hedera service that in the smart contract service specifically with some pre-compiles that made it possible for us to even do what we're doing with KNS. So really what we've done with KNS wasn't even possible until about October 15th of this last year of 2022. And they had already been launched, right, in September. So and we knew that those things were coming because we're building the SDKs that have to deploy the things that are going to be coming in the future. So we're looking at those things thinking like, man, this could really enable this very decentralized name service. It's very similar to Web2 DNS, but built in a Web3 context. Why don't we just build Web2 DNS in a Web3 context? So we weren't really thinking about competing with them, right? They were kind of following the ENS model with some additional features. They're both much better than the ENS model for different reasons on each of them. And they were using Hedera's consensus service to try to deduplicate before the purchase of domains. And so I think they did the best they could with the tools they had, and I think they did a commendable job. And I have great respect for both projects. We just happened to.
For the record, I talked to Dell. I invited him on the show. Unfortunately, he had a previous engagement, so he wasn't able to join us. But he did mention that yes, it's a good relationship between the teams. It's collaborative, so I can so just to vouch for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So from a practical perspective, like if you use KNS as a resolver, it will resolve Web23 and Hashgraph.name domains. And then I think there's a lot more synergy going forward that is kind of in the works right now with both projects. So
okay. So and again, guys, feel free to jump in there if there's any questions. There was a question that we had about the expiration / renewal date that's cooked into into KNS. So could you tell us just a little bit about so Rob mentioned a scenario where the expiration happens, right? Somebody, your DevOps guy dropped the ball and they didn't renew it or didn't subscribe in time or, basically. And if it's a popular one, something like Hedera.hbar or WallaWallet.hbar or something like that, and somebody
don't have that domain.
I was told it was reserved for us, but so that's yet to be seen, but I was told that it was reserved for us. In any case, let's talk a little bit about that scenario where where the domain expires and now you've got this little window of time. Is there any kind of process in place or anything in the works where we could kind of help avoid something like that?
Yeah, so I think we've got a little bit of time to resolve that. We've got until October of next year of this year, I should say, of October of this year to really to resolve that in a practical sense. In the DNS space, if you let your domain name expire, somebody can come in and sweep it up. That's how it works in DNS space.
Right.
And you see that periodically. I think, and Rob brought this up early in our integration discussions, and I think it was a valid point. The difference here is that we're dealing with consumers. We're not dealing with businesses who are buying domains. We're dealing with consumers who have addresses. And so I think the next step is for us to, through community engagement, figure out what a notification system looks like. I know I've already played with some ideas around how to do messaging using HCS, leveraging KNS. And so there could be some notification mechanisms built in there. There could be the opportunity to communicate with people who hold KNS domains and maybe make offers if you want to buy that domain, for example. As it stands right now, if it expires, that's it. Somebody can come in and grab it up. I think over the next year, though, what we want to do is, in coordination with the community, come up with a specification or standard that is some type of notification model.
Right.
And I think maybe now is a good time to mention that, LaunchBadge, we kind of put our heads together as a team and built KNS. But a lot of what we're building around Kabuto in general, as a project, Kabuto being the greater project, KNS being the specific project, is more of a community-driven, similar to like a DAO type model. And so I think what we're going to see here over the next years, we're going to be putting out a proposal to the community, everybody who holds tokens, to participate in that decision of how we resolve problems, just like what we're describing here. Do we come up with a new standard? Do we launch a new decentralized service? How do we solve this problem? And is it worth investing in from even the Kabuto proceeds perspective?
Right. So Tim, while I'm going to ask, I really only had one more question on the docket. Are there any questions that have come in from the audience?
No questions, but we've got a lot of positive comments from people. They love Ken's explanations on everything, and they're sold. So
Awesome.
You're looking forward to a community that's going to grow.
Awesome. Very cool. Very cool. So one of the things that Ken and I had talked about, and this is something that's come up, this is a recurring theme at the tail end of 2022 and as we go into 2023 here. And this is something that Ken, you and I talked about, is solving real world problems within the context of Web3 tooling. And one of my, and so Mance had mentioned it in one of his interviews. Venture capitalists are talking about it. Brandon and I mean, everybody's talking about, okay, so as we're in a crypto winter now. We saw a nice little bump over the past day or so, but we're still very much in the cold winter. You can see I've got my beanie on and my warm sweatshirt on here. So I'm prepared for the crypto winter that we're in the middle of here. But one of my favorite real world problems to be solved with Web3 tooling surrounds Internet of Things, IoT devices. So any of you really, but Ken, have you thought about how KNS and the Kabuto name service, how that might facilitate payments and information exchange between Internet of Things and all of these myriad of devices that are now connected to the web?
Yeah, you're gonna put me on the spot here, specifically on Internet of Things. I think micropayments is just in general. That's just a use case with massive potential that just really the dam hasn't broken yet. Like it hasn't flooded out there yet. I could very easily see IoT being a space where, whether it's paying for data from IoT sensors, for research or big data collection or whatever people are going to use it for, commercial marketing purposes, or participating in, I can imagine a scenario where, LG builds into their appliances a lot of commercial engagements where the owners of the appliances benefit from that engagement, meaning they're selling their data whether it's usage or content or whatever the case may be. I know once we start getting into visual and audio content, we kind of move out of the domain of IoT. But the fact that you have, a TV and a fridge and a dishwasher that might be from a council member, I could see micropayments and security benefits, data consent. People who want to get access to your data using Hedera from a consent perspective. How KNS plays into all of that, a lot of that is addressing and identity data, right? So addressing for payments. If I could see KNS being a shortcut for how we engage. I haven't talked to LG about this yet, but what if you had a ken.lg LGE KNS domain name that became your identity through your LG entertainment ecosystem? LG already has you create an account so you can manage your devices throughout your house. But what if that was ken.lge? And now not only is it helping me to manage my devices, but it's also allowing me to monetize my own data on those devices, or to engage and purchase content, or to skip advertisements if I'm willing to pay a penny to skip this advertisement, for example. So I could see a lot of use cases where KNS becomes my identity in the context of some of these IoT ecosystems.
Right. Yeah. And if ever there was a scenario in which you might want, where a company, an enterprise might have hundreds, thousands, potentially, if it's a big enough company, even millions of IoT devices out there, and you want to have, certain sections of your devices all resolving to one name. I mean, I can see, I see a lot of importance for something like KNS going into the future, where, all of these devices, they're talking already, but how do they exchange value? How do they exchange data in the most efficient and effective manner? And I think something like KNS could be key going forward. Yeah,
absolutely.
So Jeremy, I have a quick question.
Yeah, get in there.
So just like Rob was talking about, he wanted to get, WallaWallet.Hbar, and, the whole reason why I got Twidgetal. The Hbar symbol was, possible business uses for that. And what I was thinking was, we want the whole point of Twidgetal is to create 3D renderings and then to turn them into NFTs and then use them throughout the metaverse and everything else. And hopefully that'll be launching before too long. But, the idea was, when it's coming from this address, this Twidgetal.Hbar address, and of course we had another address as well, when it's coming from that, it's an official Twidgetal, right? It's an official one of these NFTs, 3D rendering NFTs. But what are some other ways that businesses might be able to leverage these Hedera native domains?
Yeah, so I think you kind of hit the nail on the head a little bit of, there's a canonical value to this. So not only am I adding identity to an account ID, because that some account ID owns the NFT relative to that KNS address. So I can prove that this account ID is the owner of that address. And so whatever that address, whatever those KNS records resolve to, is what that account ID wants those records to resolve to. So there's kind of an authoritative component to this, where if if Twidgetal has an account ID that's public, and we go, okay, that account ID is Twidgetal, and then we see the KNS record, the Hbar symbol, the Planck's constant, then we know that whatever you put in there is authoritatively yours, that you control that. So whether that's a decentralized identifier, a DID, that you put as a text record because you want to attest to some identity component you have, or verifiable credentials if you wanted to, verify ownership of other assets, whether they're real or digital. There's a lot of use cases I see of claiming ownership and proving ownership through KNS, specifically in the digital space. So
that's a great one. Yeah. How do you establish authority within the decentralized world? That's huge.
Like in your case, Brandon, I think, with Twidgetal, you're creating a digital twin for an item, and you don't, if I understand correctly, you don't want somebody to be able to create another twin of that exact item. There's only going to be one copy of it. That could be one of your use cases, right? So if that's the case, you could use this DID, this model that Ken is talking about, using the DIDs and the records to prove that, hey, it doesn't exist in any of the other token IDs that you own, right? That Twitchell is creating tokens for those NFTs.
Yeah, well, I think that initially we're just looking at, this is an official 3D rendering that was created by the Twitchell app. But, of course, going down the line of what you're talking about as well, you can create algorithms and stuff that can search all the 3D renderings to see if there's anything similar and so forth. And of course, we're thinking about that as well. But yeah, everything along those lines.
Yeah. Well, and I think of this as kind of like it's a link between the centralized and decentralized space. Because think about what's in that text record, right? The text record can be anything. The value of that text record on a KNS domain can be a very centralized asset. It could be an image that lives out in, on Google Drive. Mm-hmm. So you can have a very centralized asset living somewhere else that is basically being attested to in your KNS record that now links the value of that to your decentralized identity. So KNS being a decentralized record that points to whatever values you want it to point to helps link that bridge between centralized and decentralized. I know that's a big challenge. And the fact that it is decentralized in itself, it's built into smart contracts itself, means that there is no centralized component to it. You can query the smart contract directly. And if you, the owner of Twitchell, wanted to change what your avatar is, change your avatar. Done. Change your logo. You updated your logo. It's not locked in like IPFS. Mm-hmm. You can't change it. And so I know IPFS also has IPNS, which is their version of a name service. But if you go to the website, they actually say use with caution. You should probably actually use DNS instead. So in itself, they're telling you not to use IPNS. And we've looked at that too. But I think this is the next evolution of that, of like, it can have a logo, an official logo that without question is the logo that I approve as the authority of this business. And if I never ever need to update it, cool. I just updated it in my KNS record.
Well, this has been an awesome kind of battery of questions. Ken, you answered all of them astutely, as I knew you would. So thanks for that. So we're getting close to the end of the show here. So before I get into announcing our token jam token winner for the week, Ken, I just wanted to ask you: are there any last minute thoughts, anything you wanted to share with the community, or any resources, things that you'd like people to look at, places that people can provide feedback? What what would you like to see from the community watching and those that will watch in the future? Where can they learn more about you, and what are some final words for them?
Yeah, so I'll take a few of those as bullet points. So I think the first thing is when it comes to KNS, you can go to Kabuto.sh. If you're a developer, you live in Bash, and so SH means something to you. So, but that's why we chose SH. But Kabuto.sh is where you can go to learn more about Kabuto. We're also on Twitter at Kabuto_SH. And so you can learn more about Kabuto there. Just a real quick high level vision, Kabuto as a project, KNS being one of the products, we're hoping to move this to more of a community driven model that becomes a funding source for other projects that the community values. So the revenue we're taking in KNS is actually going into treasuries that we're ideally going to be using to build out other tooling and infrastructure instrumentation on top of Hedera. That being said, I just want to make the point. I know we're in a crypto winter. I know that people are freaked out about the crypto values and stuff like that. But I think I was on a panel a few weeks ago, and they asked me what I see happening with blockchain technology and Web3 in the next few years. And I said, that little lock icon that's in your URL bar that tells you that this website is secure. Like, how many of you know which protocol they're using to secure that? How many people know what an SSL cert is? How many people know what a cert chain looks like, an SSL certificate chain? Are they using TLS 1.2? Like, you don't know any of the technical things behind the curtain that's happening, but you have that little lock icon. That's what I see happening with Web3 tech in the next 5 to 10 years, is that it's going to become more invisible, but it's going to become much more meaningful in your day-to-day life. That being said, this is why I hitched my wagon to the Hedera horse, is that I look at it from a practical perspective. While the value of Hbar is going to fluctuate and crypto in general is going to fluctuate. I think the long-term value of Hedera really is in the utility of it. And we're going to see it become part of our day-to-day lives in a way that we haven't seen any other Web3 project. So I kind of want to put that out there because that's I'm talking to VCs and accelerators all the time in the Northern California, Bay Area region. And that's what they're coming to me and asking, how do we take the next step in Web3? And I think the next step of Web3 is going to be stepping into that traditional finance space and building things that are more meaningful in our day-to-day lives versus, a lot of the crypto-oriented stuff we've seen over the last 12, 13 years.
Right. Now, I know people that are out there are going to want to know more about the community efforts that you mentioned. You mentioned kind of a DAO type co-op kind of model. So if people reach out to you via Twitter, if they want to learn more about about the community-led efforts, what's the best way for them to learn more about that?
Yeah, Twitter's a good place. We're going to be launching more and more community tools. I mean, KNS is still technically in a soft launch. We haven't done a full hard launch yet. What we're doing is getting all the integration partners aligned first. I'm really excited to have Walla Wallet as kind of like the leading in the depth of integration partner. So, but soon enough, we'll launch a more robust hard launch, at which point we'll have all those mechanisms figured out. Right now, since we're still in kind of this early phase soft launch period, Twitter is probably the best place to engage with us. We got a handful of people monitoring Twitter. So you're going to talk to either myself or one of my LaunchBadge employees when you message on Twitter. So
excellent. And of course,
we're definitely going to link your Twitter username in the description.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, and of course, folks are always welcome to join us as well, either on Telegram or even more preferred is if people join us on Discord. If you've got questions about Kabuto name service, KNS, we're happy to relay any questions, and I know Ken will be floating around in the Walla Wallet Discord some too. So so if folks have questions they want to know more, feel free to reach out to either of our teams. Happy to connect you. If we can't answer the question, we're certainly happy to find the person that can. All right, so my favorite part of the show is this part where we get to give tokens away to somebody in the Web3 space. Somebody at this particular time is it's going to somebody in our Twitter family. I love doing this because it gives people an opportunity to see how fast, how efficient, and how fun it is to use these Hedera-based tokens. And of course, a big shout out to Andrew Antar and the team over at Tune.fm. They've been a partner of ours for so long that I actually, in one of the Twitter spaces, I forgot to mention that they're one of our partners, because it's almost like when you have like a brother, it's like your sibling or something, you forget to give a shout out to them. But anyway, I did want to give a shout out to the Tune.fm team and Andrew Antar out there for giving us these jam tokens for promotion. So without further ado, the Twitter family winner of the 10,000 jam tokens this week is at Symphony of Love. So Symphony of Love is the 10,000 jam token winner this week. So we'll be reaching out to you via Twitter. And I did want to thank everybody for being here, all the folks out in YouTube land that join us for these live streams. It's great to finally get these back going. We took a little hiatus. And then before we close out, another one of the important parts of the Alternative Money Monday show is we get a little market update. So Market Mondays, and since I have Brandon the Hbar Bull, could you possibly step in there and give us a little bit of update on the markets before we go ahead and sign off here?
Sure, of course, none of it's financial advice. We just like watching the markets, and we mentioned how Hbar has been doing. It has been doing pretty good over the past few days. Crypto market in general, we have Bitcoin is up about 5% over the past 7 days and about 2.5% over the past 24 hours. But Hbar is certainly outperforming. Right now, Hbar is up about 19% over the past 7 days and about 12% over the past 24 hours. And that puts us at about 4.5%. Now, we did catch some support. I was hoping we were going to see some support around 3.6 cents. So that was good to see us bounce off of that again. And then we just went on a really good run. Blew through 4 cents. There was some resistance that I was looking for at about 4.4 cents. We hit that. We bounced off it a little bit, got rejected a little bit for a few hours, and then we just broke through it again. So now we're up at 4.5 cents. Of course, who knows what's going to happen going forward. As far as resistance above this point, if we can continue to run, I would think there'd be some resistance between 4.9 and 5.1 cents. Now, I'm certainly looking forward to the stuff that's going to come out of Davos. It could be some good catalyst there. Of course, not financial advice again, but if there is going to be some announcements made, I would expect it to be done there. So I'm looking forward to seeing what we have come out of that. We're going to be doing a Twitter space with the Hbar Foundation tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern, and we're going to get Christian Hasker, the CMO of Swirlds Labs, to come on and maybe answer some questions about how everything came about of them wanting to have a presence at Davos. So that's pretty much all I got on it.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll report a little bit on Davos too. Rob and I always watching the World Economic Forum. We're always watching what the folks over in Davos are up to. So we'll report back a little bit on some of the findings from the meeting at Davos and our beloved Hedera team meeting with Klaus and all the goodies up there in Switzerland.
I think we just have to remember there.
Brandon.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Tim.
Oh, just a question just came in for you. It's for you. I mean, you can cover it after you're done.
No, go ahead. What is it?
Okay, I quote, is there a danger of IRL assets being hijacked by the creators of their digital twins on digital? For example, if I make a 3D rendering of the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah, we're really just looking at ourselves as a utility. You use us however you want. Now, of course, we're not going to go and figure out who the owner of every single one of these objects are. We're just really that utility layer to wrap essentially physical objects into NFTs and for use throughout Web3 and for authentication and appraisal and for insurance and all that kind of stuff. So really, we're not looking that far out. It's mainly just that utility aspect.
And Brandon, if folks want to learn more about Twigital, since we had somebody pop in with some interest, what's the best way for folks to kind of learn what's coming down the line with Twigital?
So I've mentioned it just a few times, and we got questions from Hello Future Buzz, so she decided to put a Twitter space together. We're still several weeks away from actually launching the closed beta. We do have a splash page at twitter.com. We just started up because we have all this interest. We started up a Twitter handle as well. But you can go to that splash page, enter your interest in all things along those lines. But we don't have too much information out there yet. We are jumping the gun just a little bit.
Well, people are excited about it. So that's a great sign. When the people are in the community are like, when can I have this? I need it right now. That's a great sign. So I think you might have found a nice market fit there, Brandon.
Yeah, right now I would just say Hello Future Buzz. Elizabeth did do a great Twitter space that I was on there for. It's recorded, so you can go check that out at Hello Future Buzz, their Twitter handle, and you can listen to what's going on with it. And there were some great questions that came out of that. So that would be my first stop if I was anybody that was interested.
Very cool. Very cool. Ken,
I listened to it.
I'm sorry, Tim, you were broken up just a little bit. Say again.
Okay, I said I listened to the Twitter space, Brandon. So I'll make sure to do it as well.
Awesome.
Thank you, Tim.
Okay.
Ken, again, thank you so much for being here. This has been a pleasure and a joy. From somebody one of the very first folks that I met in the Hedera ecosystem, and we're kind of coming, and here we are still building strong, through two crypto winners, here we still are building on this layer one network that we know is just going to be dynamite for the future, and so important in the Web3 space in general. So to have you on here, it's a real honor for me. I mean, we've looked up to you and LaunchBadge and what your teams have been doing since very early on. So to have you on here, answering questions and fielding, and to join us as a partner and reach out. I mean, it's, this is huge for Walla Walla and Ledgerama. So I can't thank you enough for being here.
Ditto. I mean, Ryan helped me solve all kinds of problems early on, with the SDKs and stuff. So, I really appreciate all the help.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure, I gotta say, and I'm looking forward to all the fun things we're going to be doing here in the near future too.
Awesome. Thanks, Ken.
Me too.
All right. So that's going to be it for us, folks. So don't forget, Follow us. You can join us on Discord. You can join us on Telegram. You can reach out to us at info@wallawallet.com. We hope that you liked the show. If you did like the show, give us a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button. If you didn't like the show, give us a thumbs down and tell us why. Those comments are so super important. We take all the comments. We love getting them. We want that feedback. We need it. We love it. Thanks everybody for being here. We'll reach out to the Twitter winner of our 10,000 jam tokens. And for this week, that is going to be it. This is JR over at Ledgerama saying sayonara, and we will see you folks next week. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.